Okay. All right. So next shout out video. Yeah. So first, shout out to the patrons. I know it's been a while. Um, with that whole "What am I playing now" video and everything. But yeah. So thank you to all the patrons. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Brett, Jeremy, Alexis, Povilis, Tyler, Jonas, Jeff, Adam, Gabriel, Rodrigo, uh, Andrew, Yuha, Lucas, Simon, Greasy Choir Boy, Spencer, Courtesy, Corey, Michael M, Brent T, Eric, Death Adder, um, Cole, Charles, Mark, and Brian H. Thanks a lot. And yeah, I really appreciate that. It's hard for me to believe that I'm already up to um, this many patrons, but I really appreciate all of you. Um, and yeah, I mean, I've really obviously kind of gone more. I've really kind of delved deeper into trying out new things and all of that, and I definitely think that a lot of that is really is really because I feel the support from all of you. In any case, let's get to the topic of the video, uh, which is Chandra dressed to kill. So I'm going to give my thoughts on this card, and I know this card's going to come out soon. Um, yeah, the spoiler season obviously is deep underway. Obviously, I'm not giving my thoughts as soon as it comes out, but I thought I need to get my thoughts about this card before it's spoiled. So I'm going to go out on a limb here. I haven't necessarily made a ton of predictions yet. Obviously, my prediction that Ragman was going to be nuts turned out to be true, but anybody who has two eyeballs can probably predict that, so nothing really that impressive there. This time I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say Chandra Dressed to Kill is also going to be nuts. As nuts as Ragavan? Probably not, but I will say that I think Chandra Dressed to Kill, at least in Obosh Red, is going to be nuts. And the reason why I think this card is going to be amazing is basically threefold. Um, and honestly, just before I get started with the three reasons, my only concern is I'm honestly, maybe I'm just this might be the first time I fail spectacularly at making a prediction here, but believe it or not, my worry more so than that she flounders is I'm worried she might even be kind of like the new Oko. Now I understand that she's nowhere near as powerful as Oko, but I think it's worth noting that a Planeswalker does not have to be as powerful as Oko to have as impressive a stranglehold on the game that Oko had. All it has to do is be difficult to kill, and it has to generate a positive card advantage as opposed to negative card advantage like Liliana the Veil, and spiral out of control quickly. And I think Chandra Dressed to Kill has that potential. I would recommend checking out Grim Flayer's discussion, I think, on Oko, if I'm not mistaken. I think he had a good breakdown of Oko. And I think he had a series called Predictions that he made, where he was right, where he was wrong, or something like that. And I think he was kind of partially spectacularly right, and maybe he got some things wrong, but I think one thing he got right about Oko was that Oko's positive card advantage generation makes him fundamentally more busted than Liliana the Veil, if I remember correctly. But in any case, yeah, I won't go into too much detail, but suffice it to say, I agree with Grim Flayer's analysis 100% that Planeswalkers that have the ability to gain positive card advantage are fundamentally have a greater potential to be broken than Planeswalkers that have the ability to, kind of like make players discard cards or sacrifice permanents or things like that, because they're cards that Planeswalkers that have the ability to sort of manage the opponent's resources, unless they're like obviously clearly designed to be busted, like maybe Karn Liberated. But obviously Karn the Liberated is freaking 7 mana, so obviously that's never going to be too busted. But you know what I mean? If Karn Liberated was obviously like 2 mana, and obviously, it could still be busted at that mana cost. But the point is there's a for equally costed Planeswalkers, positive card advantage engine is definitely much more valuable than a negative one. And the main reason why is because it's just a lot harder for the opponent to play around a positive resource generation as opposed to a negative one. Kind of compare Kroxa and Uro to get an idea. You know, one is perfectly healthy and the other is, you know, the other was completely strangling the format for a long time. And a lot of it just has to do with the fact that Kroxa can be played around. You know, you can discard all your cards in your hand, sure, you could take 3 damage, but, you know, also sometimes the cards you discard could be like a what do you call it, Ravenous Baloth or something, where you get like a free 4/4 and gain 4 life, or even not, it could be a flashback card, it could be like a Lava Dart. You know, there's just it's just card depletion strategies. They just have an inherent ability to be played around. There's like ways around them to a much greater extent. But if the opponent is just drawing like a zillion cards, there's kind of really no way to play around that. I mean, unless I guess Black Vice comes back or something, which punishes which is like a 1-mana artifact that causes players to take damage for like I think every card over 4 at the end of their turn or something. But anyway, that's another, or at the end of your turn, whatever. But I mean, even that, I mean, probably wouldn't police the format too much. But now that I think about it, that's probably one of the reasons why Black Vice was printed. Actually, it's really kind of one of the only cards that is actually specifically designed to kind of punish card advantage, positive card advantage to run amok. That one, interestingly enough, that wouldn't even necessarily punish Chandra too hard, because her card advantage is more like off the top of the library rather than like putting a bazillion cards in your hand. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Not here to critique Black Vice and how it may or may not succeed in formats where it may or may not, or in formats where it's not even legal in, which includes Modern. But yeah, well, that was a little bit of rambling, but you know, hopefully the timestamps can at least get you here to the main show. So the 3 reasons why I think Chandra Dressed to Kill is going to be nuts, and like I said, why it may even have the potential to be the next Oko, maybe in our deck, which would be kind of crazy. Maybe we shoot to the top of the leaderboard this next season. I don't know how much time I'm gonna have to really grind in the leagues, but I'm gonna tell you, I feel like with this card in my holster, there's a potential right there, that's for sure. And so the reason number 1 for Chandra Dressed to Kill being possibly nuts is that this card is very similar in most of the important aspects to Chandra Torch of Defiance, which for those who haven't seen it, sorry I couldn't find a higher resolution image, but here's Chandra Torch of Defiance. Yeah, I actually have been testing companionless versions of Mono Red more than anything just to get a feeling for how a Planeswalker with similar abilities to Chandra Dressed to Kill is going to perform. Chandra Dressed to Kill, of course, is far superior to Chandra Torch of Defiance in Obosh Red because, well, you can actually play it and play Obosh, so it's worlds better. Now, that being said, Chandra Torch of Defiance ain't no slouch, and honestly, this card overperformed so hard when I was trying it in a companionless version that I think I'm basically going to be having a companionless version kind of sleeved up, so to speak, and ready to go, sleeved up in the Magic Online sense. But I did actually pick up some copies of Chandra Torch of Defiance because they're only like $5 or something. At least they were as of like a few weeks ago or something. If they're still about $5 a piece, and if you like are a really red mid-range type aficionado, whether or not it's my versions or Red Prison, or if you like anything red that is not like necessarily explicitly burned, but anything a little more mid-rangey on the red spectrum, I would kind of recommend picking these up. And you know why? One of the reasons why is because even if Chandra Dressed to Kill turns out to be completely nuts, because of the new Planeswalker rule, you can play both of these. And I could definitely see playing Chandra Torch of Defiance and Chandra Dressed to Kill. I could even see that even being more nuts and spiraling more out of control. But there's a clear similarity between these 2 cards. I mean, so let's compare the +1 here. The +1, in both cases, well, like obviously Chandra Torch of Defiance, her second +1 here adds 2 red mana, and Chandra Dressed to Kill's first +1 adds 1 mana. Obviously, Chandra Dressed to Kill also deals 1 damage to a player or a planeswalker, but most of the time I think that's going to be fairly incidental. Although when the lower and lower the opponent gets on life, the more and more Chandra might just incidentally finish the game with just plussing, which is definitely not to be underestimated. But I think that for the most part, adding the extra mana with Chandra Torch of Defiance is obviously a stronger ability in the abstract. But of course, this comes at the cost of the Planeswalker costing 4 more mana. I mean, not 4, sorry, 1 more mana, 4 instead of 3. I will say that when I've tried out Chandra Torch of Defiance, this +2 on the red mana is huge, because this means that a lot of times I can play Chandra, like Stomp with Bone Crusher Giant, or play like Pirate Spellbomb, Crack It, Lightning Bolt, whatever you have it. Or I can wait till turn 5 and I can play this and play like Blood Moon or something on the same turn, or Hammer Bogardan if I'm playing Hammer Bogardan. Or heck, I could even play Chandra Dress to Kill if when that comes out, if I want to combine these. But the point is that this enables you to get a lot of action out of Chandra the turn it comes into play, effectively making it kind of only cost 2 mana, because it kind of adds 2 mana back. Now, obviously, you can't deploy this right away, and depending on what else you've got in your hand, you may have to wait a little bit to play this and deploy whatever else you've got that you want to. But the ability to double spell with Chandra's ability fundamentally allows you to defend her while plussing up to a much greater extent than if she couldn't add mana. And we have that same dynamic going on with Chandra Dress to Kill, namely the +1 adding 1 red mana. It adds obviously 1 instead of 2, but this does cost 1 less mana. So all things considered, it kind of comes out to about the same. You could play this on turn 3, you can plus and Lightning Bolt, or you could plus and crack a Pirate Spellbomb, at least in my deck, because I love craziness like Pirate Spellbomb. Could be Firebolt if that's your jazz, or Lava Dart in some versions. Any one of those cards are like mainstays that I've loved and I cycle through from time to time. But the fact that she can come down on turn 3 and plus and play some type of burn effect and defend herself, I think is huge. I think that's going to be one of the mainstays of what she does. It may not necessarily be that you burn something every time she comes down, but the fact that she can come down and burn something, or just play a Pirate Spellbomb or a Ragavan or whatever it is huge, because that means that you're not taking an entire turn and an entire 3 mana off to play her. You do get some mana back, and anything that you make it more difficult for your opponent to deal with her in one fell swoop and deprive you of an entire card and an entire 3 mana and effectively a full turn is going to be welcome. Because obviously the only downside to Chandra Dress to Kill, the only thing that makes it so that this card may not be busted, the thing that her Achilles heel, if you will, is that this could come down on turn 3. It could plus, and then the opponent could somehow deal 4 damage to it without her accruing any value. And I will say that one of her Achilles heels is probably going to be Fury, but thankfully not every deck plays that. And unless it's turn 5, they're going to have to 2-for-1 themselves. Which is good, because I think any Planeswalker that forces the opponent to 2-for-1 themselves to deal with it, like for example Big Teferi, at best you're going to have to 2-for-1 yourself or attack into it. But if you can defend it in even the slightest way, if the opponent has to like play some type of effect that answers a Planeswalker directly as opposed to attacking with creatures, that's going to be a 2-for-1, because you play a Planeswalker, you draw a card, and then if the opponent deals with it, you still went up in resources, even if it was dealt with. And that's something that Chandra Dress to Kill threatens to do if the opponent plays Fury by exiling a card in their hand. It doesn't do it innately with the ability, but the fact that this costs 3 mana means that there's a very good chance that the opponent's not just going to be able to play Fury and deal with it outright. That being said, as the game goes on later in the game, I could definitely see Fury being a little bit of an arch nemesis to this card, and that is admittedly one of the reasons. That is one of the advantages that Chandra Torch of Defiance has, is that this card immediately pluses out of Fury range. But I still think the pluses here are very, 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 very good. So obviously we compared the +1 ability, and that ability to make this kind of effectively cost 2 mana, just like Chandra Torch of Defiance, is humongous. I mean, obviously being able to ping Planeswalkers is good too. I think that's something I'm going to have to see in action to be able to evaluate that more accurately, to see exactly how good that is. But depending on the Planeswalker, that could definitely be a plus. Like obviously, the dream scenario is they play Liliana minus, go down to 1, and then we play Chandra Dress to Kill and we uptick and kill it. Or they play Chandra Torch of Defiance for that matter, and they downtick on one of our creatures. We play Chandra Dress to Kill and we uptick. I mean, now talk about value. And we add a mana, so that's obviously living the dream. That's not always going to happen, but man, oh man, when that happens, that's going to be sweet. I'll tell you that much. So next, let's compare the next +1 ability, which is exile the top card of your library. If it's red, you may cast it, and that is one of the most common abilities that Chandra Torch of Defiance had as well. Yeah, that's a huge, super powerful ability because that enables you to generate basically unlimited card advantage throughout the game, assuming you can defend the Chandra. It's a little bit of a downside in both cards' cases because you can't play lands. In Chandra Torch of Defiance's case, it's because it says cast the card, and in Chandra Dress to Kill's case, it's because it says red. And as we all know, lands are colorless. Even their mountains are colorless; they're not red. So, in both cases, you cannot play lands with these cards. That being said, they do allow you to card filter for gas, because if you're not revealing a spell off the top of your library, unless you're revealing like a Relic of Progenitus or something, or a Pirate Spellbomb if you bring those in, because I think Pirate Spellbomb is most likely going to want to be in the sideboard in decks in versions of Obosh or whatever have you that are playing Chandra Dress to Kill, because you do want to minimize the amount of non-red spells that you have. But if it reveals something like a Relic of Progenitus, that kind of is what it is. I think you have to live with it. But since over half the deck is essentially going to be red cards, obviously it's very similar to Chandra Torch of Defiance in that you're, for the most part, either revealing a spell and playing it, or you're getting a land out of the way off the top of your library. So in other words, you're digging to gas one way or the other, either through direct card advantage or just getting lands out of the way. Now, I will say that one critical difference, though, is that Chandra Torch of Defiance gives you 2 damage to the opponent's face if you can't play the card that you reveal off the top, or if you don't want to for whatever reason. That's not an option you have with Chandra Dress to Kill. A part of me wants to say that's no biggie, but I will say that the amount of games I've closed off from just having the opponent take 2 damage every turn is not insignificant with Chandra Torch of Defiance. This ability to ding the opponent for 2 every turn. Sometimes I even find myself not playing decent cards that are reveal off just because I'm threatening the opponent's life total very hard with dinging them for 2 every turn here. And obviously that effect is completely absent for Chandra Dress to Kill. So needless to say, Chandra Torch of Defiance does have a better +1, also because it doesn't have to be red, so you can play your Relic of Progenitus, you can play your Pirate Spellbombs and what have you. But it again bears mentioning that Chandra Dress to Kill is a full mana less. Never underestimate the difference that 1 mana makes. After all, the difference in 1 mana is the difference, for example, between Standstill and Ancestor Recall. Now, maybe not the best example, because Standstill not only costs 1 more mana than Ancestor Recall, both draw 3 cards, but Standstill is also an enchantment, and it requires the opponent to play a spell for you to draw 3 cards. And if you play a spell, obviously the opponent draws 3 cards. So it's not obviously in a way comparable at all to Ancestor Recall. I'm trying to think of a good example of how much 1 mana makes. I mean, I guess it's in a way the difference between Lightning Bolt and Incinerate is another way to look at it. One card sees 0 play and another card sees an amazing amount of play, even though they essentially do the same thing, or Searing Spear or whatever have you. 1 mana makes a huge difference. And and obviously in our deck where we have to play odd costed cards with Obosh. I have a companionless version, but I think Obosh is always going to be kind of the marquee version of the deck, because Obosh is just such a powerful companion, and you don't really have to give up all that much in order to gain access to it. So it's probably going to always be the kind of marquee version. And obviously the fact that Chandra Dress to Kill gets to be played in that marquee version, whereas Chandra Torch of Defiance has to carve out a space in kind of an alternative kind of companionless version, definitely bodes a lot in favor of Chandra Dress to Kill. That is for sure. So the +1 ability in both cases for the card generation effect is kind of the bread and butter of this card. But the way most of the time, in my experience, when I play Chandra Torch of Defiance, I immediately +1 for 2 red mana. I play something, and then from then on out, I use the +1 to cast a card off the top of my library. And I suspect that's going to be how Chandra Dress to Kill works too. You're probably going to play this +1 to add a red and deal 1 damage. Probably play something of one way or another, something that furthers your game plan and hopefully defends Chandra as well if it's under pressure in any way. And then from then on out, you'll probably be exiling cards from the top of your library. So, Yeah, so I think that, and that is one of the main reasons why I think Chandra Dress to Kill and Chandra Torch of Defiance, I think, are very comparable, because most of the time, that's what I found myself doing with Chandra Torch of Defiance, plussing to add mana and plussing to play cards off the top of my library. The fact that Chandra Torch Dress to Kill, can do both of those things while also costing 1 mana less and enabling us to still play Obosh is humongous. So that is, in a nutshell, the main reason why I think this card is going to be amazing in the Obosh shell. Now, if you look at the next ability Chandra Torch Defiance has, this is kind of going to be probably the main. This is going to be the main test for Chandra Dress to Kill. Is that unlike Chandra Torch Defiance, Chandra Dress to Kill, as you can see, only has 3 abilities. Chandra Torch Defiance has 4. Chandra Torch Defiance can -3 and deal 4 damage to target creature. Chandra Dress to Kill has no such ability. So that's going to be kind of the test, because I will say, while most of the time I'm not using this -3 to deal 4 damage effect from Chandra Torch Defiance, I will say in certain situations and also in certain matchups, this ability does become critical. For example, against Golgari Yawgmoth, that deck produces so many creatures that Chandra very rarely sticks, actually, to be honest. And that's going to be a matchup where Chandra Dress to Kill may not really shine that much, to be honest. Some go-wide decks just might be able to overwhelm her a little bit too easily, and that's okay. Chandra Dress to Kill doesn't have to be a spectacular A+, knock it out of the ballpark card in every single matchup in order to be busted, in order to be tier 1, and hopefully not, but even possibly bannable, although I doubt it. I doubt it's going to break our deck that hard, or could break some, more like it's going to break somebody else's deck. It would stand to reason. But that would be crazy if actually our deck became so good something got busted. We can only dream, right? I mean, something got banned, but we can only dream, right? Hopefully that thing isn't Ragavan. I wish if they, instead of banning Ragavan on a side note, I wish they would just errata it and make it so that it only adds it only makes a treasure token. It doesn't like steal cards off the top. Because honestly, that's all I really care about for the most part. I really want the treasure token, but whatever. It's honestly still a little bit busted even without the ability to play stuff off the top. But still, anyway, it's neither here nor there. For the purposes of this video, yeah, Chandra Torch Defiance. Chandra Dress to Kill doesn't have the ability to deal 4 damage to a creature. And Chandra Torch Defiance, like against the Golgari Yawgmoth matchup, the fact that you can always play this and then immediately tick down on like a Yawgmoth is humongous. It single-handedly turns this card from potentially being kind of lackluster to actually being a critical card, but not necessarily for the Planeswalker ability, but just to be a nice clean answer to Yawgmoth. And there's other examples too. There will be certain situations and certain board states, for example, where the opponent will have a lot of creatures, and you may not be able to realistically defend your Planeswalker. And in that case, Chandra Torch Defiance, worst case scenario, can always just come down and snipe a creature out. And then even if they kill it, at least you traded 1 for 1, instead of the worst case scenario, which is you trade 0 for 1 if you just play a Planeswalker and then creatures overwhelm it. So yeah, so that's going to be the test in many ways, and I do fully acknowledge that's the critical difference here. Is Torch of Defiance has the ability to defend itself. This is a complete Planeswalker. This is the closest thing Red's going to get to having a Jace the Mind Sculptor. And honestly, playing with it makes me wonder, why haven't I tried this before? I only tried it after I saw Chandra Dress to Kill, and I really wanted to get a feel for how good it would actually be in Obosh. And that leads me to believe that actually the companionless versions of my mono-red mid-range deck probably should have been playing Chandra Torch of Defiance from the very beginning. This card is the complete package, no doubt about it. But that takes us to the last ability of both of these cards, which is Exile, which I'll call her CDK, and CDK's or CDTK. In her case, she exiles the top 5 cards of your library, and you can cast red spells this turn, and you get an emblem wherever you cast a spell, you deal damage equal to the card's equal to the amount of mana you spent to cast the spell, which is important, because if you play like a flashback, you get more damage. Which actually, like in the case of Firebolt, for example, if we're playing Firebolt, that's critical, because that means we'll get 5 damage off. We'll get 7 damage total off of our Firebolt instead of instead of just an extra 1 damage. So that's pretty critical there. Yeah, this card can spiral out of control very quickly if you get an emblem, because you also get some card advantage while you're at it. And Chandra, Torch of Defiance, has a very similar ability. Her emblem is just basically whenever you cast a spell, this deals 5 damage to target creature or player. I think this was errata to say any target. I'm not sure if this how the Planeswalker rules were when what's it called, Kaladesh, I think that's the set this was in, was out. So now I will say, I gotta say, at first blush, and it's hard to compare these until you've actually played with both. I have played with Chandra Torch Defiance. I have not with Chandra Dress to Kill. But at first blush, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Chandra Dress to Kill's ultimate is better, because she gets a similar effect where you get damage for every spell you cast, but you also get that burst of card advantage where you get to play, I'm going to say on average about 3 out of those 5 cards you reveal, since on average there's about a 3-to-2 ratio of spells to lands. Now granted, maybe it's more like 2.5 out of those 5 cards, meaning 2 to 3 depending on the variance. Because obviously we do have some colorless spells, and we do, but it depends actually too, because a lot of those lands are the double face modal cards. So if you reveal a Valakut Awakening or a Spikefield Hazard, you do have the option, of course, to play them for the spell half instead of the land half, and you will get extra damage from them as well per her emblem. All of that is to say that I think you're going to get about 2.5 cards on average. Maybe we can even say as many as like 3 on average out of these 5 cards are going to be spells. Plus we're going to get 1 to 3 damage extra per spell, depending on whether it's like a 1-mana lightning bolt type card, or whether it's a 3-mana hammer, or I don't know, or another Chandra, or whatever have you, or Seasoned Pyromancer. Could be Fury and you get 5 damage, but you're gonna get some, about 3 extra spells, 2 to 3 extra spells, and you're gonna get about 1 to 3 extra damage per spell of those that you cast. That I think bodes in favor of Chandra Dress to Kill over Chandra Torch of Defiance. I think her ultimate is honestly a little bit better, but on the other hand, Chandra Torch of Defiance, of course, you do get a clean 5 damage for every spell. So even if you cast like a Pyrite Spellbomb or something, you get 5 damage. Then you crack it, then maybe you draw another one, get another 5 damage, then maybe crack it, then get another one or something. Obviously you only get 1 damage per cycle of that with Chandra Dress to Kill. You obviously get 5 damage for Chandra Torch of Defiance. And I've been there where the opponent has been at like 15 life or something, and I ultimate Chandra Torch of Defiance, and next thing you know, they're dead. Because that's just how this works when you have this emblem where every spell you cast deals 5 damage. They basically die the following turn for the most part. So yeah. But yeah, all of that is to say, I have used all of these abilities of Chandra Torch of Defiance, and I can verify that all of these are extremely powerful. And I can say that these abilities for Chandra Dress to Kill are very similar. The fact, though, that she is missing the two things that work against her is that she's missing the ability to deal 4 damage to a creature. If anything causes her to be a little bit lackluster, which I doubt she will be lackluster, but if anything does cause it, it will probably be missing that ability. And one thing that worries me is Chandra Torch of Defiance doesn't necessarily see ubiquitous play, despite the fact that my testing indicates that she is nuts. Probably because other colors oftentimes get splashed, and you can play things like Jace the Mind Sculptor or something, perhaps. That's what I'm hoping. I'm just hoping that people have access to cards they feel are better in the slot, and may very well maybe better in the slot for their needs. And not because of any type of deficiency in Chandra Torch of Defiance herself, because I honestly didn't see much, to be honest. I think this is a complete package Planeswalker. This is not necessarily a complete package Planeswalker, Chandra Dress to Kill, that is, in its own right per se, but what she is a super incredible role player. I mean, you can have a role player that is even more busted than a main card itself. I think a good example of that is probably something like Dark Ritual. I think we would all agree Dark Ritual would be a huge mistake to print into Modern. And needless to say, Dark Ritual is obviously not the kind of card that is busted in and of itself, but it's busted more because of the rest of the decks that tend to surround Dark Ritual. And that's my assessment of Chandra overall, is that she is kind of more of a dark ritual type of planeswalker, not just because she adds mana, but that is kind of an interesting little funny coincidence there. But she doesn't fill the same role at all. It's just that her ability to ramp us on mana, which also allows us, for example, to play a turn 4 Fury, which is nothing to laugh at all. She can mana ramp us and get card advantage, and she's got a ultimate that's going to end the game. In not too short order. It might not end the game immediately the next turn, but the game will probably end in fairly short order after this ultimate goes off. Anyway, so that's reason number one. I know this is probably going to be the longest reason, is that this card compares very favorably overall to Chandra, Torch of Defiance, and most of that is because she costs 1 less mana. Overall, her abilities are a bit weaker, but I don't think that they're so much weaker that they. I think honestly you still get more bang for your buck because you don't get really that much of a downgrade on any of her abilities, and you do get to play her for 1 less mana. So that takes us to reason number 2 that I think Chandra Dressed to Kill is going to be nuts in at least the Obosh mid-range type of archetype. And by the way, I could also see this card being nuts in Gruul mid-range as well, because the vast majority of their cards are green. They probably play close to as many actual green cards as we play colorless cards like Pyrite Spellbomb and Relic of Progenitus, which is not going to deter us from playing this card, and I doubt it will deter Gruul mid-range for playing this as well, since almost all their cards are either land or have at least 1 red mana symbol in their deck. So I expect to see this card make a cameo in Gruul mid-range. Although Gruul mid-range, though, is not playing Obosh, so it is entirely possible that they feel they can't play both this and Torch of Defiance, and then they may end up just opting for Torch of Defiance. But we shall see. But at least in the Obosh deck, we kind of have to play this because obviously Torch of Defiance disables Obosh. The reason why I think this card, the second reason I think this card is going to be nuts, is that basically that this card fills a very similar role to what Hammer Bogardan filled. I have done some preliminary testing, and I think it may be possible to cut Hammer Bogardan for Chandra Dressed to Kill. Now, if you're following me on Twitter, you know that my most recent experimentation, if you will, because obviously I don't have access to the card yet, although I have pre-ordered them because I might end up getting hosed a little bit, but yes, just a little bit worried if this goes completely out of control with Oko levels, you know. Even I have a certain limit. I can only stomach going too much out of pocket for these type of pieces of cardboard. But yeah, the fact that and by the way, the experimentation I did was that I was playing a companionless version with Chandra Torch of Defiance instead. And the fact that Chandra Torch of Defiance's card generation ability allowed me to play the late game to an almost unlimited extent. So much so that I didn't actually need Hammer Bogardan in at least one version that I played with Chandra Torch of Defiance. It does give me hope that if there is a way that we can cut Hammer Bogardan, it's probably going to be her. And believe it or not, it's just really hard for me to imagine getting away from a card like Hammer Bogardan unless you have access to something like Chandra Dressed to Kill. Because at the end of the day, see, the issue is that no matter how many, light up the stages, Bone Crusher Giants, heck, Firebolts, heck, Seasoned Pyromancers, heck, whatever it is, whatever kind of ability cards you have that generate card advantage you have, all of them only do so much, and then eventually you start running out of gas. The thing that Hammer Bogardan brought to the table, the key role that it played, is that it gave you the ability to have basically unlimited value, especially if you started getting mana flooded. And while this Chandra Dressed to Kill doesn't play exactly the same role because it can't deal 3 damage to a creature and take it off the battlefield, for example, or snipe a planeswalker down as effectively, although she can snipe a little bit at a planeswalker with her +1. But it's the fact that she can keep ticking up again and again and again, basically as long as you can protect her. That gives me high hopes that she has that ability. She is a Hammer Bogardan type of infinite sort of resource generation type of effect, which is critical, I think, for the Obosh mid-range type of strategy. You got to have an effect like that. If it's not Hammer Bogardan, in my opinion, it's got to be something else. And these cards, Torch of Defiance and Dress to Kill, have that potential. But again, of course, if for all of those following me on Twitter, you probably know that the most recent version of I think both Obosh and Companionless is still trying to squeeze Hammer of Bogardan together with a Chandra of some type, Dress to Kill or Torch of Defiance. My initial testing does suggest that Hammer of Bogardan is completely compatible with Torch of Defiance, and I see no reason why it wouldn't be compatible with Dress to Kill. So you could play both. But the point isn't so much that this necessarily will replace Hammer of Bogardan. It could actually. But the point is that this is another effect like that. And if I'm going to be honest, I think it is a much more efficient effect overall. It gives you a lot more flexibility too, with multiple different abilities, where Hammer of Bogardan is just... well, I mean, I guess there's creature, player, or planeswalker, so there's actually a surprising amount of modality to something as mundane looking as Hammer of Bogardan. But Chandra Dress to Kill definitely has more options. There is more utility to be had here. Not necessarily creature control, but in most other ways, there is more utility to be had here. So the fact that she creates an ability like that means that whether we are supplementing Hammer of Bogardan or whether or not we are replacing Hammer of Bogardan with her, she is going to give us the ability to play the late game like we've never played before, and we've already dominated the late game for the most part. There's only a handful of decks that actually kind of outgrind us. Azorius Control, maybe, if they really get their, if they really start chaining those Memory Deluges together. Before Memory Deluge was printed, I had really no problem outgrinding Azorius Control, but Memory Deluge is obviously the supreme nutsness of card advantage, needless to say. But yeah, I mean, only a few decks, like maybe with Memory Deluge, like the control decks that play that, possibly, but obviously we have usually those decks take a big beating from Blood Moon, so that's good for us. But then there's also like Bant Ephemerate, which sometimes can be hosed with Blood Moon, and also sometimes you can just kind of squeeze together like an ability to go aggro temporarily with Ragavan and other things. So there's ways you can kind of finesse them. And what else? And honestly, not that much else. I mean, to some extent, elementals. If they can start ephemerating their like a what do you call it? If they can start ephemerating a Moldrifter, then elementals can possibly outgrind us. But obviously, if we can prevent that, then I think generally we outgrind them anyway. But the point is that, I mean, with this card could potentially allow us to even outgrind most of those decks. Now, most of those decks, except obviously for, well, I mean, I guess elementals theoretically could play Chandra, but, I don't think they're usually interested in playing a planeswalker besides Teferi, I guess. And they've got a lot of non-red stuff, so they're probably not as interested in playing her. But yeah, I mean, the fact that this card gives us another almost infinite kind of, ability to generate card advantage, in addition to or instead of Hammer of Bogardan, is really huge one way or the other, because it's also just much more efficient. I think most of my red decks, yeah, I think most of my red decks may try to squeeze her in, but I've still got some of these old Hammer versions that do have that. It's kind of hard to see where I'm going to squeeze her in, but I'm definitely going to have, probably my marquee version is going to have her in there for sure. But yeah, so that's reason number 2, is that this card has that kind of infinite, resource generation type of effect that Hammer of Bogardan was bringing to the table. But so the third reason why I think this card is going to be nuts is, I mean, it's kind of a rehash of what I've been saying before, but she's 3 mana. So I mean, I know I kind of already sung the praises of that, but it bears repeating. She is only 3 mana. I said it once and I'll say it again. The fact that she is a pretty much fully powered planeswalker at only 3 mana cannot be overstated. She does enable Obosh. She comes down potentially as early as turn 2 if we hit with a Ragavan, or if we're playing a version with Strike It Rich, because that card does seem to have potential, although believe it or not, I've actually been discovering that maybe just playing 28 lands, if playing like both Spikefield Hazard and Valakut Awakening, may actually be the way to go, because the bigger issue I find is just missing land drops more so than not being able to mana ramp. But that being said, this card can easily come down on turn 2 if we connect with Ragavan at the very least. And this card, I also forgot to mention, but it also is a way to win the game under Ensnaring Bridge too. In addition to Hammer Bogardan, this card's ultimate gives us the ability to win through an Ensnaring Bridge. And at the end of the day, just being a very cheap Planeswalker that can come down as early as turn 2, just gives us a lot of flexibility here, a lot of potential power. And then of course it will supremely help our mana issues from then on out. If we are experiencing the +1, will add us a mana at a moment's notice. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I guess by the third point, there maybe isn't that much more to say. Other than that, there's only been a handful of 3 mana or less Planeswalkers printed, and I think it's safe to say Chandra is probably the second or third. She's probably at least the third best 3 mana or less, or I should say 3 mana Planeswalker ever printed. She's probably the third or fourth best 3 or less Planeswalker ever printed, unless I'm missing something, which I very well might be. I think we can all agree Oko is definitely the best 3 mana Planeswalker ever printed. That card was a mistake, no doubt about it. Honestly, Chandra Dressed to Kill, I think has a legitimate claim to possibly being maybe number 3. I mean, I was going to say number 2, but I honestly do think Wrenn and 6 probably. There's probably some debate between which is better, Liliana of the Veil or Wrenn and 6. But I think Wrenn and 6, because Wrenn and 6 is positive card advantage, like I said. And honestly, Wrenn and 6, that's the kind of card that is pretty nuts. I'm not going to lie. The fact that it can also defend itself with dealing with creatures is actually pretty darn impressive. So, and obviously, what Wrenn and 6 does for the decks that it is in, it is completely nuts in those decks. So Wrenn and 6 is probably the number 2 best 3 or less mana Planeswalker. And then of course it's between this card and I think Liliana of the Veil, for which is the third best of the 3 or less Planeswalkers ever printed. And I think that there could be a very good case for this to really leapfrog Liliana of the Veil. I love me my Liliana of the Veil. I have those in the mono black mid-range decks that I've been trying out. Liliana is an excellent card. She has a lot of very useful abilities. But again, it just comes down to the fact that Chandra has resource generation, both mana and cards off the top of the library, whereas Liliana has card depletion. And I think that really bodes well for Chandra. And I think that Chandra, it could very easily be Chandra's time to shine. And I guess we certainly will see. Yeah, I'm really not sure what more can be said other than that the fact that she is in that company, that there's very few Planeswalkers. I mean, because obviously there's been other 3 mana Planeswalkers like Jace Bailoran, which is good, but I think of Jace Bailoran as kind of like a glorified Howling Mind type of card in many ways. It's good, but it's not a fully powered Planeswalker. I don't think. In certain decks, it definitely could be a stronger role player, but yeah. And then of course you've got like your Chandra Acolyte of Flame. I tried that a little bit. Chandra Acolyte of Flame is just extremely underpowered. It's nowhere near comparable to Chandra Dressed to Kill. I think we're immediately going to see the best mono red 3 mana or less Planeswalker ever. And most likely everybody's going to forget about Chandra Acolyte of Flame. Although I could see some decks trying to play a little bit of both. Perhaps you could make an argument that your 4th Chandra Dressed to Kill would be better off as an Acolyte of Flame. I would very strongly disagree with that argument, because believe me, I've played this game enough to know that while you think you're clever and you think that that guarantees that you're gonna draw 1 Chandra Dressed to Kill, and if you draw another Chandra, you're gonna draw an Acolyte of Flame. what's really going to end up happening is you're going to just draw one Chandra Acolyte of Flame, and you're going to be really disappointed. That's what's going to happen. So anyway, but yeah, at the end of the day, since she's in the company of amazingly powerful, very lower cost planeswalkers, I think we're going to have really strong. We're going to see good things from this card, and by good things I mean good things for Obosh Red, possibly not so great things for the format. But I do think the ultimately the fact that her loyalty is not too out of control. She is most likely, if I'm going to be honest, she is most likely not in any serious danger of getting banned, mostly because, yeah, her loyalty is fairly modest. She immediately can +4, but that's not too nuts. She's always within range of being immediately furied. She can be attacked for a fairly substantial chunk of damage right in the beginning. She's not like Oko, which I think immediately went to 6 or something stupid like that. So the fact that her loyalty is priced at a fairly moderate amount, I think is going to keep this card from being too nuts. If she started off at like 5 or something, then I think there could be a decent chance this card would get banned. Thankfully, it looks like the fire design has started getting a little bit under control. Anyway. I don't want to keep rambling forever. I just want to say I'm excited to try this card. Let's see. And yeah, thank you again, everybody. I hope that you found this insight interesting. I will say there's another card. What's it called here? Reckless Impulse. Let's see here. Yeah, there is another. There is one more card here. I've already spent enough time, so I'm not going to do a full review here. But this is another card that I got my eye on, more so for the Giganta versions, because I think this card is at the very least another light up the stage 5 through 6. I mean 5 through 8. In companionless versions, this is probably better than light up the stage, because if your only 1-mana creature is Ragavan, then most of the time you're playing light up the stage for 3 mana anyway, which is still surprisingly good, by the way, at 3 mana. But yeah, Reckless Impulse is this is a very strong role player in the non-Obosh versions. Let's put it that way. I think it will be. I think this card will be very good in the non-Obosh versions. But I'm not going to do a full review here. I'm just going to say that I got my eye on this card. I might do a review on this the next time, but I kind of think what this card offers kind of speaks for itself. And I'll just say really quickly, one hidden aspect to cards like this that I think gets overlooked sometimes is that this card really helps dig for lands. If you have 2 mana, but you get mana screwed off your 3rd and 4th land, it's very likely that you're going to be able to dig into your 3rd and 4th land if you play this on turn 3. Just really helps you hit your land drops, and also obviously it's card advantage. I don't really think there's that much more to say about this card, because it's basically a 1 mana less light up the stage. Just you don't have Spectacle, but in some decks where you don't really have the ability to turn on Spectacle as easily, you'd obviously gladly take that 1 less mana. I won't talk about this as much, but I think I'll basically leave it at that. This is another card that I think is a little bit it's less impressive outright like Chandra is, but this is well, I mean it could possibly the red expressive iteration. I don't know what else to say. Yeah, but I think we'll leave it at that, and I think we'll say it's never been more exciting to be a red mid-range player. Let's see how this all shakes out. Thank you all for bearing with me. Tried to get this video out. So excuse me if it maybe wasn't as completely thoroughly scripted as maybe it could have been, although none of my videos, to be frank, are completely thoroughly scripted. But I did think about this a bit, and hopefully my thoughts all got out well enough. If you all like this content, or if you all like if you all like this content, let me know. I originally was hoping to do videos like this once a week. I don't know if I'm going to do them once a week. I'm going to try to do them periodically, that's for sure. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, and y'all have a wonderful a wonderful week. I think this will go up sometime in the middle of this week, so probably see it on like a Monday, a Tuesday, Wednesday, or something like that. Maybe Thursday or Friday. I'm not sure. See it sometime during the weekday. So hope you all have a great rest of your week whenever you see this. Take care, and yeah, all the best.